Tracy, are we ready to roll?
Sure thing. I was just trying to get all the attendees on my list here. We got a pretty big crew in the audience tonight.
Okay. Let me know when you're ready.
And it looks like we have a quorum, so whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm going to call our April 12th, 2021 Village Plan Commission meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Chris Zellner.
Here.
Phil Willems.
Here.
Kristen Runge. Brad Zeman.
Here.
Brian Malish.
Here.
Chris Thomas.
Here.
Brian Wallace.
Here.
Okay, so first item we have is minutes. Would somebody like to make a motion? If there's any issues, let us know.
I move approval of the minutes of the last meeting.
Motion by Phil Willems,
I'll give that a second.
second by Brad Zeman. Tracy, roll call, please.
Brian Wallace.
Yes.
Brian Malish.
Yes.
Brad Zeman.
Yes.
Chris Thomas.
Yes.
Phil Willems.
Yes.
Chris Zellner.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, next we have our public comment section. If there's anybody here who would like to make any comments on the items on or off the agenda for this evening, please raise your hand and Tracy will bring you in.
I have one hand raised. I have four hands raised. Okay. Going in order here, I have.
Tracy, do you want to clarify? Some of those may relate to public hearings. So you might want to clarify.
Okay. This is public comment on items usually not on the agenda. We have three public hearings tonight. So if you wish to speak on any of the public hearings that are on the agenda, please wait until those public hearings. If you have comments on items that are not a part of a public hearing, now would be the time to raise your hand. So going first in order, I have Mary Heimbecker. So I'm going to unmute her. Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, my name is Mary Heimbecker. I'm at 306 West 3rd Street. I would like to make a comment about the presentation of the West Business District. I'd like to see a survey of residents and current business owners of the West Business District and downtown transition areas before $50,000 of taxpayer money is spent on possible uses and redevelopment. In the packet, it says that property owners will be interviewed on a 1 to 1 up to only 4 for the downtown area and only 8 for the West District. I just don't feel that that's enough voices and that many people should have a right to speak on what they would like to see. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Mary?
All right. Next on the list would be Mary Ellen Kearney. Okay, Mary Ellen, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can talk now.
Thanks for the instruction. I'm Mary Ellen Kearney at 317 West Main Street, the red brick house to Walgreens. I can save you a little money on figuring out here at the West End. George Fish was living in this house when he platted Waunakee in 1871. I can see where he gave right of way to the railroad from the back of the house. I am living right next to the naturally occurring transition point between residential Main Street and commercial Main Street on this west end of town. It's the row of old pine trees planted next to my driveway to separate our house from our farm. Now it separates the end of 300 West Main Street and the beginning of the 400 West Main Street block. Commercial development of the field between O'Malley Street and Century Avenue started 70 years ago when my grandmother sold a lot that's now the BP station to a family that built the subsequent Sinclair station. Before that, the developed residential blocks ended at O'Malley Street. A study to determine areas we want for infill and redevelopment with citizen input seems like a necessary plan. However, the word infill and redevelopment scare me. It implies that what we currently live with is in need of much change. It is my opinion that before we have a plan like that, we as a village need to determine exactly what we mean when we are referring to our historic downtown. There are many programs available that specialize in defining, preserving, and maintaining historic main streets. Getting some professional expertise in that area would be a wonderful gift we could give our community to commemorate our sesquicentennial celebration. It should include more than just the original plat. We need to know the cultural geography and the early citizen social development of the sense of community that still unites us. If we plan for infill and redevelopment before identifying things in our community that are historic, we should not be redeveloped. That should not be, we stand the chance of losing some of our historical identity. We need to know what to protect and maintain before we plan infill and redevelopment. It would be like putting the cart before the horse. Main Street is our living history. We want to retain the charm, character, and sense of history that is demonstrated in a drive-through Waunakee on Main Street. Developers are asking to be invited to our birthday celebration, but it makes me feel like they are wanting to plan the death of the charm and character of our small town community by suggesting more dense and urban style plans without trees. An example of this is the T-wall development, which taught us all a lesson.
Thank you,
And
Mary.
I have a neighbor who has no computer or internet in her home. Her name is Elaine Laufenberg. Could she speak on this computer too at this point?
I don't see why not. That'll be fine.
Okay, then identify.
Hi, this is Elaine Laufenberg. I live at 301 West Main. I would like to reject the idea of having commercial businesses placed on this block or zone for that. And my question is also, I was never notified with a letter that this was possibly going to happen. Hadn't one of the neighbors, Mary Ellen, told me about it, I wouldn't have known about it. I think anybody that is affected by it should be notified so they're aware of it. I know there's neighbors on the block at my end of the block that haven't lived here for very long. They don't know about the rezoning at all. So I think we all need to be notified before a meeting comes up again like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tracy.
Okay, next I have Linda Ashmore.
Hi, I wanted to speak about the proposed $50,000 study to look at coming up with a new zoning code for the areas considered the downtown transitional area and the Western Business District. This area includes homes on the east and west edges of Main Street. So I'm proposing an alternative to the study, and maybe we'd save $50,000. The alternative is more heavily favored towards current citizens instead of developers. First, send a survey out to all homeowners or property owners who are being considered for the rezoned area, asking if they would like to be rezoned to what their current use is. Many of the homes on Main Street that are zoned commercial have been residential for decades. Secondly, meet with the residents after the survey results have been gathered and you've received feedback on what their wishes are. And third, look at rezoning in accordance with what the properties are currently used for, if they've been used for that use historically. Part of the reason people were upset with the large apartment buildings on Main Street was that people who lived in the area downtown felt like our concerns were ignored. Affordable housing is hard to come by in Waunakee. The homes in the older area are the most affordable homes. The properties that are being considered for this new zoning are not only people's biggest investment, but they are their homes. They're where kids are raised and memories are made. Just because there is interest in redeveloping the downtown doesn't mean it has to happen. I think we need to look at, is there really a need for it? there are very few affordable homes and lots of vacant commercial spaces currently. Also, if the village pays $50,000 for the study, I kind of feel like it's a foregone conclusion that you're going to get the results that you want. I'm requesting that you don't recommend moving forward with the study. Consider that there are different options when looking at the downtown. You only received your packets on Thursday, and the actual properties considered for these new rezoned downtown transitional area and Western Business District are not even included as a map for us to see. I think more information is needed. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have no further hands raised.
Okay, then we will move on to our first presentation, which is presentation of the West Business District Planning Proposal. I assume that who's introducing this?
Chris, I can introduce it, and then we can have Ed and Jason, make as much of a presentation on this as the Plan Commission has wanted. We're not really in a position to recommend any action tonight. This is really food for thought. We don't even have the dollar amounts is more than I anticipated. But these planning objectives were identified in the comprehensive plan. These were the next steps in terms of how we want some of these areas to develop. And I have talked to a number of the residents, and I think there's consensus in that downtown area of really trying to preserve that corridor as a residential in some parts of it. And I think this actually could help assist in that preservation. But there's other things in the study as well that I think the Plan Commission, may want to get some, assistance on. And I'm sure that Jason and Ed could modify this. That was really the point of this, is just to introduce it. Let's get the conversation started. And it's something that, a larger amount like this, and even if it's, half this amount for a limited scope, is going to take some effort to budget for probably in 2022. But this was really to get the conversation started about some planning efforts that are really needed in a couple of these key areas. And right now, this isn't being driven by developers. But if we wait too long, that's what's going to happen. We're going to have to make decisions based on developer requests for redevelopment. And this is really to head off and really set the stage for when you get proposals coming in over the next couple of years. So with that, Chris, I'll ask you and how much you want Jason and Ed to present tonight.
I think they should present what they were planning to present.
Okay.
I guess I'll take the first crack at that. I'll start with an overview of what we're talking about and why, and then ask Ed to jump in and complement that if that works for everyone. I think it might be helpful, especially to the comment about about the lack of a map. If I could orient people, if I could be allowed to share screen, which I think I have been. Is that coming through?
Yes.
Thank you. So I've centered the comprehensive plan's future land use map on this area in red, which is identified in the comp plan as the West Business District. And so what the comp plan says is that it has just a few policies regarding the future of this district, and says that a planning process is really needed to figure out what is going to happen over time as redevelopment occurs within this district. There was not a lot of discussion going into that. It was more of a deferred, this is something to be figured out later. To the point of Ms. Kearney's comment about, or comments regarding preferences for the 300 block of West Main Street, which I don't know if my cursor is moving well enough, but it is the easternmost block here that's shown in red. That block, both sides of the street are predominantly residential right now. And it is not intended, though the words do imply it, it is not intended that we're talking about infill and redevelopment everywhere. Certainly there is interest in infill and redevelopment generally in the central part of the village, but that doesn't mean everywhere. And though not stated as clearly as it should be, in some cases and in some areas, I expect the outcome of any planning process would be to affirm preservation or conservation of existing development. And that 300 block is a key candidate for that. When we talk about transition areas between the downtown, the downtown core, which is to the right side of, or the east side of the map that we're seeing here, we're talking about the 200 block and the 300 block of West Main Street. And if I pan over to the east, we're talking about, I believe it is the 300 block under the word Main of East Main Street. Predominantly areas and part of the 200 block areas that are still include single family homes. As was also pointed out in the earlier comments, most of those homes that are, all of those homes that are showing up in the comp plan here as this is the downtown central business district, they're all zoned C1D right now. Which means they have commercial zoning. Some of those are in our actual commercial buildings. Others are single family homes, and others are single family homes that have been converted to commercial use. And while there may be a simpler approach of just asking, hey, do you want to be rezoned? And then rezoning those that want to rezone to their existing residential use. What we're proposing is that there be more of a public process around that to talk about the transition zones between the downtown core and this West Business District, and then to talk about the West Business District. The West Business District extends out really to the west edge of the village, at least on the north side of the street there, and north and south to encompass pretty much everything that is not single family residential or a bit of multifamily residential there. Certainly all of the commercial and some multifamily residential. And we are anticipating soon some redevelopment proposals to come forward for properties on Century Avenue. And so it was partly with that in mind that there was some discussion at the staff level to say, it's probably time to get on with this planning process for thinking through what the community does and doesn't want. Ideally, we have this kind of more detailed discussion before development proposals come forward rather than after. So the process that we had described is kind of breaks the process, the project into those two areas a bit, and so there would be attention in different ways to the two sides of the two planning areas, where there would be a little bit more focus on one-on-one stakeholders in that West Business District, where there are some larger commercial landowners or commercial landowners with near-term interest or potential for redevelopment that we felt it would be important to talk to. With respect to the transition areas, in particular, those 200 and 300 blocks of West Main, the intent was to have a focus group discussion to which all the property owners in there would be invited, and then also reserve some option for some one-on-one discussions if necessary, either because people missed the focus group or we felt that there was some additional conversation needed. And then in addition to that, there would also be public meetings to present initial ideas about what we heard. First, to present what we heard, what we learned in in the process of talking to property owners and residents, and to present some initial ideas for what's possible, what would and wouldn't change in various scenarios. And so to have some discussion about some concepts, talk about that then with Plan Commission, make some revisions to come up with one preferred set of land use concepts. Not that we're designing redevelopment, but rather we're kind of setting the framework for what is desirable and what's acceptable versus what is not acceptable in these areas. And at the conclusion then of the process, identifying for action by the village an amendment to the comp plan that would attach to the comprehensive plan the work product of this effort, and also a to-do list to be executed shortly thereafter, probably to make a few zoning amendments to create one or two new districts potentially, or at least revisions to existing districts, because in some cases we think that there are things that the village would probably be comfortable with that are not acceptable right now. For example, in the 200 block of West Main Street on the south side, which has been the subject of several redevelopment proposals that got to various stages, including the T-Wall project. That's zone C1D and would allow fairly intensive development. The alternative to C1D is maybe the R5, which isn't a great fit because of the setbacks required, and something in the middle of those two that would allow for townhomes, for example, isn't exactly possible right now. And so I use that as an example to explain what we would one of the things we would be thinking about in identifying a mismatch between what the community says people are interested in seeing in the future and what's actually possible right now. Finally, I would note that Ed and I are both here tonight to talk about this because Grafe and MSA are proposing to collaborate on this. We have been working together in various ways with the village, and we would like to work together on this. And so we've come up with a way that we can distribute the tasks among us and both continue to be involved on this effort. Before giving it back to the Plan Commission for questions, I'd like to give Ed the opportunity to catch anything that I missed and add a few comments of his own.
Thanks. Thanks, Jason. Good evening, everyone. No, you did a great job in laying out the focus of the effort. And I just want to go back to the 3 or 4 comments that were made. Those comments are not out of line in what the intent of this proposal is. The intent of this proposal is to clarify things, to establish parameters, and maybe some of those parameters have to change from what they are today. And the word redevelopment can be looked at as a very aggressive word, as to, I think Jason said it earlier, redevelopment includes preservation. It includes maintaining fabric and uses. So I think the idea is to work with the community, and there, as he said, there are some public meetings. There will be working sessions with commission that are open to the public. And this was a first pass at it. That's not to say we can't include or increase the amount of public meetings. That doesn't mean we can't incorporate certain tools that will enhance that dialogue. But what's more important is to set the framework and the context and establish parameters so that what happened with T-Wall doesn't happen again. So there's a clear understanding where the boundaries are, what the intent of the boundaries are, with enough latitude to allow for creative land use and investment. When I say investment, it also means retaining and stabilizing the current investment that exists in the village. so that when people look at their property and they see the forward growth, they can then take on and be a major part of the redevelopment of their property. And then finally, I think by having these expectations and parameters clearly defined, the intent is also to keep good neighbors, so that one neighbor understands how far to push it or not push it, and that the other neighbor understands what their neighbor is entitled to. I think a lot of times when things aren't clearly established, we start having a divisiveness and people not understanding, and all of a sudden neighbors need more than fences to remain friends. So I think the idea of engaging and testing some of these things, and most importantly, what you have in front of you is a process. It's an inquiry, it's an invitation to participate. None of what was read or is in the document are firm recommendations at this point. So I understand the concern that things are being recommended. That is a premature comment. We haven't recommended anything without going through the process. And by making it a legitimate process, engaging, I truly feel that you're going to be much, you'll have a higher understanding of where your community is going, where you don't want it to go. And again, it won't be an individual conversation. It won't be a privileged conversation of a few select. It'll be a community conversation. And when we're all said and done, the intent is to have a consensus of what these parameters are and how we can operate on these parameters. And I'll leave it at that. So no one's
Okay.
pulling a fast one here.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Jason, for your comments. Commission members, questions, comments at this time? I'll just go around. I can get my view better here for a second. There we are. Brian Malish, any comments?
Not especially. I thought, Jason and Ed's explanation of really what this is was pretty thorough, pretty complete, and appropriate. I guess I saw it as an opportunity for us as the village to kind of, like I said, get ahead of what we want to have happen to this area, not necessarily to dictate what happens to this area. So I like being ahead of it. Opportunities to engage the public, maybe that's something we can look at, and even sprinkling in a few more along the way in terms of possibly modifying this proposal. I think there's clearly a lot of sensitivity to the area. So I think anything we can do to open it up, even more than it does feel pretty open, but anything else we can do to sort of enhance that, I'd be on board with. But no, I think it made a lot of sense to me. So thanks.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Brad Zeman?
No feedback. No, it was very straightforward and well thought out.
Brian Wallace?
I am, excuse me, I'm open to looking into some sort of planning initiative in this area. I would hope that we would do it with a straightforward and open communication with all the residents and all the parties that are involved, and not withhold any biases or any preconceived directions we want to go, and make it straightforward and include the community and really get a comprehensive plan going forward, and not just pursue certain agendas.
Thanks, Brian. Chris Thomas?
Thank you for the presentation. That was really good. A couple clarifying things that maybe you guys can help me with. Is it just that area in red that we were talking about, and then also the block or so across from Village Park, or is it also the 200 block of Main Street, the West 200 block?
Sorry, I was trying to manage all my controls. It is, so the West Business District is the entire area in red. When we talk then about the transition areas, the 300 block of West Main becomes, we would be taking that out of the conversation about the West Business District, and that would be part of the transition area conversation. And so it would be the 300 block and the 200 block of West Main that would be the focus of that that transition area discussion. I think that would be the primary focus, but I think that the conversations there are also worth having regarding the east end of Main Street as well, where there are still single family homes there. Does that answer your question?
It does, thanks. And then I see the project schedule here. Is the timeline, go into a little bit more detail on the timeline, and if the West Business District timeline is different from that transitional area?
Our intent was that the two areas would go through in parallel. And so we would be using public meetings to talk about both areas and kind of doing our various, mapping and analyses of condition values and uses and property and things like that together as one process.
Yeah, no,
Not sure if
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish up. I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure if that was the intent of your question.
It is, yeah, to know, yeah, if they're going to work in conjunction or be separate timelines. But then I also wanted a little bit more detail on what that timeline looks like how many months ahead are we talking?
Yeah, so we were talking about roughly a 9-month process in total for this effort. So it's some back and forth with Plan Commission and including those various stakeholder meetings of various types. So our anticipation was 9 months.
I just want to add that by having this be more of an integrated process, first of all, the areas do influence each other. But more importantly, it's also a more economic way of doing it instead of stringing it out, so that you're getting dialogue. We can phase it in such a way that we have a part A, a part B discussion, but the analysis and the influence of one decision on the other, it's probably better to talk about it during the same timeline.
Okay, that's all helpful. Thank you. No more questions from me.
Okay, Phil, Boone?
Thank you. As I understand it, this is strictly a presentation. No action is going to be taken or nor is it expected, but a little bit about clarity, I guess, in the planning so that somebody doesn't come with a clear expectation that, yes, we can change this, you're going to be able to get a conditional use, et cetera, et cetera. My personal opinion is that the one block area doesn't lend itself to parking requirements for a business, et cetera. Even though across the street there are businesses, it's just hard to look at this area and move forward unless there is a clear-cut plan. Not that this is a plan that we should agree on necessarily, but yes, we should have some kind of a plan going forward. And the plan doesn't happen to happen tonight or this spring. Hopefully the plan would happen after we could meet and talk in a more conducive manner. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I think I got, Kristen's not here, is that correct? Tracy? I just don't see her on the
That's correct.
screen, so I just want to make sure. Okay, so thank you guys for the presentation. I think it was very informational. Thank you for those who already spoke in regards to this topic. As we go through this whole process, I'm torn on this one pretty heavily. So Jason and Ed, so you know this, and where we're going to go with it. And I also think that it's expensive. I mean, we're spending a lot of money on a small amount of the village to look at it, when we spent, roughly $90,000 on our full comprehensive plan for the whole community. So to me, this seems expensive for what we're looking at. That said, I'm also understanding to the fact that Kevin even is retiring in a month, and we have a new person that's going to be coming in. And I think it would be appropriate for that person, no offense to Kevin right now, I appreciate all your work, Kevin, I think it's appropriate for us to have that person on board when we start this process. So they're in tune with it. So assuming we start the process again, I do believe that there's something important within our downtown, and that is history. I can't disagree with any of the things the folks said. That is a historical area in our downtown, and these houses are all different. As you go down Main Street, they have character. They're well kept for the most part, and that's something I'd like to see us focus on within this. And that's really what's important with this, is for those who are coming out strong against this right away. I mean, there's really not been any discussion amongst any of us up to this point. This was just a presentation on looking forward. Just like we want to plan everywhere in the community, we need to be always looking forward into that future for what it's going to hold. Sometimes it's going to be clear, sometimes it's going to be unclear. The interesting thing right now is we're going to have an interesting time for both Jason and Ed as we go through this, because we've had such an outpouring of people already that this has got up in arms. And you probably expected that before we even got to this meeting. But the fact that that's occurring, I ask that everybody, as we go through this, keeps an open mind, and that we're not saying this is what's happening right now. We're just looking at it so we're better prepared down the road within it. The T-wall thing was mentioned. I look at it differently than you guys were probably, and that the fact that they were asking for us to change zoning to meet their needs, and we were not held or bound that we needed to change our zoning for that, for what they had proposed. So this is kind of what you're saying, I think, is that you're saying, let's get so it's established before they come here, that that's going to be off limits. Okay, I see both of you are shaking your head, so I'm assuming that that's accurate with what we're trying to accomplish here. I just would like to see us try to figure out a way to accomplish this at a reduced price over what that is. I see this as it's very expensive compared to looking at, when you think about our comprehensive plan and how much that entails and what we all have to do with that, this seems expensive. So those are my comments for this evening. And what else do we need to do tonight, Kevin?
Nothing, Chris. I think it's been well stated tonight, and that you're not taking any action. This is setting the stage for something in the future to get the discussion started. I heard some pretty good comments by the Plan Commission members. Sounds like there's certainly some interest in starting down this road, and couldn't agree with you more. In involving that next person and having them part of the process would be very important. And maybe that person has some thoughts as well on how this process should play out. I just want to get you guys thinking about this before I left, and I think my mission's been accomplished.
All right, sounds good. So I'm hearing, I just got texted that my mic is muffled a little bit. Is that accurate? Is it better when I talk louder or not really?
It's
All
better.
right, I'll try to talk as loud as I can. I apologize. I had a Zoom issue on my other computer, so I had to do a rig up on this computer. So I will fight through as best I can. And if there's issues that you can't hear me, somebody speak up, okay? All right, let's move on to new business. Our first public hearing and discussion action on a request by Arboretum Village LLC for an amendment to the general development plan, specific implementation plan, and condominium plat. Lot 61, Arboretum Village, corner of Hogan Road and Quinn Drive. Kevin?
Chris, the Plan Commission's already taken action on this, but it's been our past practice to hold a public hearing on these types of matters. So we did not. We inadvertently didn't publish it. We did publish it in the newspaper, but we didn't publish it on our agenda item. So be consistent with past practices. We have we re-advertised it in the newspaper, and we placed it as a public hearing. There's not changes other than some minor setback that were addressed to make sure we had clarity for some setback issues, which has been done. So it's been updated for that. But in essence, it's the same project that the Plan Commission took action after last month. Now is your opportunity to hear from the public if there is anybody who wants to weigh in on this. But they'll also get the opportunity at the board level.
Okay, so I will open up our public hearing then for those who would like to speak on this issue or topic. If you would like to, please raise your hand and Tracy will bring you in.
I have Linda Ashmore with her hand raised. I will allow her to talk.
Yeah, there were a couple of things that I just was hoping that we'll consider. And I understand it's already been approved at the Plan Commission level. But one of the things is that the road is really narrow. And they talked about fire trucks having to jump the curb at the last meeting. And I'm wondering, like, school buses, and it's also a private road, and what happens when a private road at some point wants to become public? I don't know if the village has had experience with that or not. And one of the things that I'm hearing as you're looking at more inclusive Waunakee is that not having the pockets of communities. And so this is just a 20-unit condo thing, which I think the condo is, you know, the condos are a great idea, that they're needed. But as you look at future development that kind of putting things up in their own little pocket neighborhoods maybe isn't the direction that the village was talking about going in. And then the other thing is that it's right next to the skateboard park. And so I didn't see anything that really addressed sound issues. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Any others? Going once? Twice? Okay, then we're going to close our public hearing. Any other comments from commission members in regards to this? I'll just go around quick. If you don't, or actually I'll just look at your heads. Actually, I'm going to do it by verbal. So Brian Wallace, any comments? Additional? Brad Zeman? Brian Malick?
Nope.
Chris Thomas?
I just confirm that the motion we made last month then will hold true, that we don't have to state it the same. I know we talked about emergency vehicle access and things like that at the last meeting. Do we have to mention that in our motion now?
I think you could just reaffirm that the attached site plan as amended is approved with all the conditions that were included with the Plan Commission meeting in, I guess that was in March.
Okay, Phil?
No, I think the street is consistent with other condo developments we have. And that's not really a curb, isn't it? It's more of a walkway. That's an extension that is emergency vehicles could go out on.
I think that's accurate, Phil, and the fire department has reviewed this, you know, and they've weighed in on it. So I tend to, you know, look to our fire department to weigh in on those safety issues.
Yeah, anyway, it looked consistent with our other condo developments.
Okay, so thank you guys for all your comments. To Ms. Ashmore's comments, I would just say that thank you for making the comments. As far as the skateboard park and noise, I would just say that anybody who builds or buys a home or a residence that's next to a park or anything, they know that it's there to start with. And same thing as if you're in a park and you've got, you know, 500 soccer kids in your backyard, there's going to be noise back there from that every once in a while. So I think that this was a good use of space, and the condominiums are definitely needed. So I'm still in favor as it was presented last time. But we'll need an emotion from somebody to approve that.
Okay, I make a motion to approve specific implementation plan SIP conditioned upon the village board approving the amendment to the general development plan and conditioned upon all village staff comments resolved to the satisfaction of the village engineer. Second part of the motion is recommend to the village board that it approve the amendment to the general development plan and approve the condominium plat for lot 61 of the Arboretum Village, conditioned upon all village staff comments resolved to the satisfaction of the village engineer.
Okay, so we have a motion by Phil. We have a second by Brian Wallace. Any other comments from anybody? Raise your hand if you have one. Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. Tracy, roll call vote, please.
Brian Wallace,
Yes.
Brian Malish,
Yes.
Brad Zeman,
Yes.
Chris Thomas,
Yes.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Phil Willems.
Yes,
Motion's carry.
Okay, next we have concept review and discussion, David Certified Auto Repair, Vcar, amendment to general development plan for Waunakee Business Park 2 to construct and operate an auto repair business on lot 11, Waunakee Business Park. Before we start this, Tracy, is this a public hearing?
No.
No, this is not.
Okay. Second, I'm going to be recusing myself on this particular topic. So I would move that we promote Phil to the chair of the committee. Go ahead,
Okay,
Phil.
thank you, sir. Okay, I guess Kevin's up on this, right?
Yeah, sure thing, Phil. Let me just give an introduction and just say and point out that you're not taking any action tonight. If this proposal moves forward, it's going to require an amendment to the general development plan. And at the staff level, we're proposing that we just amend the one lot, which is along an arterial street, which we think is makes sense, to allow for that one lot general development plan amendment to allow for this particular use in the business park. That'll require a public process, a public hearing at the Plan Commission, then again at the Village Board. So while it would be helpful to get some input from you tonight, that's certainly not going to prohibit them from moving forward with the formal process of seeking the amendment to allow for this. I would generally say that the village staff and our consultants are generally supportive of this, especially considering it's a high quality architectural building, and that we limit the amount of like the outdoor storage that could occur on this lot. So with that, Phil, I think it'd be appropriate to have the applicant make a presentation, walk you through what they're proposing, and then if you're so inclined, to give them some feedback on their proposal.
Okay, applicant, please.
Good evening, this is Scott Truel. Thank you for taking this up this evening. I'm the general contractor that is working with David to create the new 8,000 square foot Vcar facility on lot 11. We had the opportunity as we were developing plans to meet with Ed back in February to try and make sure that our building, while relatively simple on the inside, fits within the neighborhood and is consistent with the adjacent buildings. We weren't aware when we first started that we were under the impression that our use was actually a conditional use. And so that's why we got a bit downstream here before we realized that we need to go back and do the one lot general development plan. And so we're looking to work through that process hopefully next month. But what we have before you is, again, an 8,000 square foot building, roughly 80 by 100. It has an 18-foot eave height. And what we're using for materials are insulated metal panels, two different types of insulated metal panels. And then you see extensive glass and masonry to try and create what we think is a very clean line and modern looking auto repair center. We then also have the sunscreen in that southeast corner of where the entry is to the project, and have tried to carry through David's existing colors and color scheme and the like. And I know David is also online and may want to make a few comments. Generally, in looking at the staff comments, it appears that, as Kevin said, generally there's support of staff. A couple things that we just need to work out. One that came up was with regard to the bike path and sidewalk on the Hogan Road side. And so we'll definitely work with staff to figure out exactly where that should go and what we need to propose as a part of that. But beyond that, this is an opportunity to retain an existing, successful and growing local businessman. And we're looking to be at a point where we will be starting as soon as we get approval, starting this summer and completing before year end. Beyond that, I'm open for any questions you might have.
Okay, thanks, Scott. David, do you want to say anything, or should I go give this to the commission? Okay, well, we'll go with commission. Brian Wallace, do you have any comments?
Not really, Phil. One question I would have is I see here that the site shows some potential future additions. I'm assuming, Kevin, that the way this is laid out with some of the ponds and just is going to encompass the whole site as if it were all built out at one time or whenever it would get built out. And then the other question or comment would be just, again, probably looking ahead, but on the building, it looks like they've done a nice job to put a nice product out here. The one question or concern I would have as we go forward, and I guess could be addressed at a later date, is that all of a sudden this doesn't stretch out to a 200-foot long building looking the same all the way through. That there's some other additional things with any expansion that would happen in the future.
Great, thank you. Ryan?
I think maybe more of a maybe question for Kevin. Business park in general, pedestrian, I don't know, paving access. I heard a little note about a bike path continuing, I guess, along Hogan Road. For the most part, it's a single-sided solution out here in the business park. Is that correct?
That's accurate. Correct. Right.
And,
right.
And more of a bike path. So as far as along the south side of the property, that would be taken care of by the one that's already kind of by the ice pond. So we're really only looking at the east side going up Hogan Road.
Yeah, that's how I'd look at it. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay.
But otherwise, no, I thought it was a nice building, good for the spot. And, yeah,
Chris
look forward to seeing it.
Okay, Chris Thomas.
No questions. Plan looks good from what I can see.
Okay, and Kristen's with us now. Your turn, Kristen.
No questions. I'm just going to listen in for a while and catch up.
And Brad Zeman.
Decent looking building. You got a good contractor and a good operator. Nice to see some additions going on in the business park.
Okay, from my standpoint, I'm a consumer with Vcar. From my standpoint, I would welcome this because now I can get in and out without having to fight with school buses that are gassing up, etc. And I think it would be a good spot going forward with everything else that's being built out up there. With that said, David, are you still with us?
I am.
You have anything to say, sir?
I don't think so, unless you guys have questions for us. I look forward to moving into that location when it's finalized.
Okay, well, there's no recommendation necessary, no action necessary at this time. It goes from here to the village board, right, Kevin? Or
No,
comes
it'll be back
to-
here it'll come back to the Plan Commission next month.
Okay. Nothing else, then we turn it back over to Chris Zellner and move to the next item.
All right, thanks, Bill. Next, we have our next public hearing and discussion action on a request by Happy Place Holdings, LLC, Milestone Human Resources to rezone 315 West Main Street from R3B residential to C1D downtown commercial. Kevin.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. I was just going to ask Scott if he could mute, and he just did. So this is a public hearing, and I think there's going to be a lot of interest in this public hearing tonight. We have an application for rezone to a commercial, from a residential to a commercial, to allow what initially started out as a home occupation. But as we explained at the staff level, under the current rules and ordinances, a home occupation is not allowed unless you live there. So it's a requirement that somebody that is going to have a home occupation actually has to occupy the premise. So with that, Angie's pursued this this rezone, and I think it'd be appropriate to have her make a presentation, and then following the presentation, let's have the public hearing.
Sounds good. Is Angie on? Yeah, yep, there she is. So, okay, go ahead, Angie.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing me today. My name is Angie Addison, and I own Milestones Human Resources Consulting. We were on Main Street at 105 East Main for 3 years, and we outgrew our space. So we're currently temporarily at 109 South Street, sharing a building with Madison Partners. I've been looking for a place to purchase. I want to invest in the place that I run my business out of, and I want to stay in Waunakee. So I've been pursuing about 20 properties here in Waunakee that have been for sale. And I did receive an accepted offer from 315 West Main Street, contingent upon rezoning. So that's why I'm here tonight. My intent, just to be clear, I also care very much about Main Street and how Waunakee is represented. And my intent is not to change the charming home at 315 West Main, neither its interior or its exterior. I think it's quite charming as it is. Our business is pretty quiet. We don't have clients come to us. Rather, we go to clients, and we also support clients via video. And so I'm looking to pursue rezoning to just have myself and my small team in that place to do our work. And we would use the existing parking. I had submitted a letter with the to scale drawing of the parking, which would use that back driveway and also the garage that exists. There's only 2 of us that would transport there at this time. So it would just be the 2 of us and no other changes to that property. I'd also propose, if approved, a small unlit sign in the front, unlit purposely because I don't want to be a nuisance to the neighbors. And so, you know, that's what I'm looking for today is to be part of the community, have and own a building rather than paying rent. I've looked extensively at the properties for lease downtown and to have that rezoned so that I can keep my business here in Waunakee.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I think it's appropriate to open up the public hearing. And for anyone who would like to address the commission on this topic, please raise your hand and Tracy will bring you in as necessary.
Okay.
So go ahead, Tracy.
Yep, I have first hand up is Mary Heimbecker. Mary, are you unmuted? I seem to have lost Mary. Next in the list, going down would be Sue Beekner.
Good evening. I am the daughter of Viola Beekner, who resides at 310 West Main Street, directly across the street from the proposed home purchase for the business. And both my mom and my brother, who currently live here, both signed the petition in opposition to this rezoning. I admire Miss Addison's her want to keep the community looking as it should. Our biggest concern is having this rezoning opening up other possible rezoning on this block. There is no parking on Main Street. The roundabout that is at Walgreens at the corner has helped traffic issues, but the traffic at this end of Main Street is awful. We often cannot cross or enter Main Street from O'Malley Street because of the traffic. That is probably our biggest concern here, and my mom's biggest concern is that this would open up a door that we don't want opened, and forcing the residents of this block and the block across the street to be subjected to additional traffic and other issues. So I guess that's our biggest concern. My mom wanted me to put that forward to her after our family's lived here over 60 years. My dad purchased it from his grandfather, Pete Meyer. He felt very, very strongly about keeping this home, a Beekner home, as long as possible. So thank you all for hearing us out, the Beekner family, and that's all we have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Go ahead, Tracy. Go ahead, Tracy.
Mary Heimbecker is next.
I figured out my issue. Sorry about that test, if you guys heard that. I'm against the rezone to C1D as a as a conditional use permit or a deed restricted permit could work for that resident to accommodate the use that Happy Place Holdings LLC is requesting. This would then keep the residence as R3D. Then if the new owners sell, the conditional use would go away and the home could be used as a family dwelling again. I just had my property appraised and the appraiser and I were chatting. He lives in Middleton. And one of the things he mentioned was that Middleton and Waunakee are pricing themselves out of homes. Do we really need to take one more home out of R3D? That would be one that a first-time home buyer would be looking for in our village and make it a C1D. I just think it's a bad decision all around. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mary. Next, Tracy.
Next, we have Mary Ellen Kearney.
Yes, thank you. I live right next door to the property in question, and it's a charming home. And I've had 3 lovely young families live there in the past several years. It's one of the most reasonably priced homes, and I don't think it should ever be changed from a chance for a family to get a start to a commercial place, because there are plenty of those in town. Also, on this block alone, it's not a dying block. It's a very vibrant block. All the homes are owner occupied except one up-down rental property, which has been there since I've been around, the 1940s as such. And there have, in the past several years, been 4 young families. That's different from 2 that live next door that have moved into the neighborhood with young children. And that's such a good sign. It's great to hear children laughing and playing in the neighborhood. And I myself, if that were turned commercial, I would be isolated between two commercial properties instead of having nice relationships with neighbors. And I met the owner of Happy Place Holdings. I wish she were moving in. I'd love to have her as a neighbor, but just the concept of going commercial, and especially in the middle of a block. And I don't think you do that in any other residential area. So let's just keep it residential.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. Go ahead, Tracy.
Okay, next we have Linda Adler.
Okay, my name is Linda Adler, and I'm speaking for myself and on behalf of my husband, Kent Adler. We live at 315 Fairview Circle, and our looking out our front door and our front porch faces this subject property, the backyard of it. We're directly behind it. We're asking for you to deny the request to rezone it to commercial property. In our condominium association here, we have 75 units in this small footprint. So there's a lot of residences in a small area. Just in 125 feet, lineal feet of street back here behind where the subject property is, there are driveways to 9 residences within 125 feet. And you can just get an idea from that how much traffic is coming and going each and every day. As far as the parking goes for this property, the applicant had indicated she may only have 2 employees or 4 or 5 someday, but once it gets rezoned, it's definitely a problem, because as I looked at the list of possible occupants down the road with the new zoning, there were 54 different businesses on that list. And I'd say 98% of them are going to require a ton more parking if any of them were able to go into that home. So there's no parking in front of this property because all of that parking was eliminated there, I believe, when the roundabout was put in. There's no public parking adjacent to it where people could park. And there's no street similar to like West Street would be down by the old funeral home property on this block as well, but across the street. They have the side street, West Street, to park on both sides, plus 2 or 3 stalls in front of their business. I think that makes a big difference. They're there, but they have the parking to support it. With the current climate in downtown Waunakee, as far as commercial properties go, there are so many vacant properties as it stands now. And also there's a couple more vacant ones on the North Century Avenue development here that's just to the west of our properties. So we're kind of thinking that we keep creating more commercial properties and squeezing out the residences, but yet there's so many vacancies that obviously anyone that wanted to move back into that area once it's commercial, they can't go back into that for a residence. We believe the property values here would decrease pretty much, I believe, if we're looking at a myriad of businesses and backyards turned into commercial parking lots right out here, right out our front door. I had sent you a letter with signatures of 39 property owners in the neighborhood that were also asking to deny the request to rezone. Many for the same reasons that I've just explained. And in summary, we want to maintain the exact charm and character of the neighborhood that draws the petitioner to file this request to rezone in the first place. So again, as it stands, if the commercial zoning is going to open it up to any of those 54 businesses, we definitely would request that you deny this request for rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tracy.
Next, we have Linda Ashmore.
Hi, I have the same concerns that have already been raised as far as taking out affordable house and turning it into commercial when there's already so much commercial that's sitting vacant right now. I live at 114 South Street, so just a block off of downtown, and we get realtors sending us stuff all the time, and we actually have individuals that have written to us saying, you know, if you ever put the house on the market, we've been looking. And I talked to the lady recently, and she said, you know, she's contacted like 20 different homeowners individually trying to find a house here. So when you take one of the few affordable houses out of the mix, I just don't think that's a good idea when we have so much commercial open. The idea of a deed restriction was mentioned in the packet, and I don't think that's a good option. Keeping track of a deed restriction is hard to do. An example is like the upper lot of the parking lot by the library. And the whole trying to sell the library, I think, has been kind of muddied or whatever by that deed restriction for the parking. So that trying to keep track of a deed restriction on a property is just hard to do. So I'm sympathetic to the owner that she wants to stay in Waunakee, but rezoning residential, especially in the middle of a block where there's no parking in front of it, doesn't make sense to me. Thank you.
And that was our last.
Okay. So tonight, it looks like our motion is to defer the item to the May Plan Commission meeting. Before we do that, I think
Angie Addison had raised her hand.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Angie.
Sorry, I just wanted to make one more comment. I appreciate what the neighbors had to say, and I respect where they're coming from. Just wanted to make a couple clarifications. The addition, if we do ever add more employees, would be remote, so that wouldn't have a need to have a parking lot. We would honor deed restrictions. I thought Mr. Valerius's suggestions on the deed restrictions were excellent, and those would be things that we would honor. And then just finally, I would just share with you, I don't know if the letters were published or not, but I do have 3 adjacent neighbors who are in support of rezoning 315 West Main Street. Thank you.
And I have to close our public meeting at this time. So almost missed doing that. So moving forward, we need to have a discussion here for those of you that want to make comments this evening. Otherwise, it'll move on to our May Plan Commission meeting. So I'm going to start with our brand new member into the meeting. Put her in the fire right off the bat here, Kristen Runge.
Sorry. Yeah, so I just wanted to ask Jason and to clarify what R3D is for those that might not know. R3, and then I'm putting myself in that category. I know what R3A is, but I don't know beyond a duplex what's allowable on an R3D lot and how the zoning would change significantly.
Jason, you're muted.
Jason, you're muted.
I said everything I need to say and now I'm done. Sorry, it's the downtown residential district. I don't have either in front of me or committed to memory some of the spatial dimensions of that district. I could answer that for you in a couple of minutes if you come back to me.
I've got that for some of them, but can we go more than a duplex on that on an R3? I don't think we can.
I don't believe so, no.
No. But it could be a duplex at some point in time. We could place 2 families instead of 1 in a house like that.
I think so, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Space allowing.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris Thomas.
I guess first off, I'll ask why we're not, or why the applicant is not pursuing a conditional use permit at this residence instead of rezoning.
Chris, if I could, I think I can get back to Kristen's, question as well and try and do all of them. Kristen, the R3D is really the intent was to have single family dwelling units and as a conditional use, the 2-family dwelling unit. So you had it right. So that was a good point. And Chris Thomas, the reason they can't seek a conditional use permit is because they're not going to occupy the building. So they're not going to live there. In order for them to get a conditional use for home occupation, somebody that person applying for it has to live on the premise.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. So I know there's no action right now, right? But I guess I'll just state my opinion on this and see where that goes, I guess. But maybe a little bit of a West District business plan, but my personal preference, I guess, is not to change any zoning in that 300 block. And I feel like if we start it with one location, that's going to be a slippery slope and maybe the first domino, and then we would see more of that, and then we'd lose some of that small town charm, in our downtown area. So, just stating my opinion on that to begin with, but I know that there's no action or anything this month, but just want to let that be known.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Brian Malice?
Figure out unmute. I struggle with this one, but I think the tipping point, probably for me is the initial discussions that we kicked this meeting off with, and just wanting to have kind of a better understanding of how we want to see this area of the downtown corridor, develop over time. And it feels a little odd, kind of cart before the horse, just to then single one property out and say, okay, well, let's flip this one over to C1D, create kind of an odd island after we just had this discussion about, well, what do we want this area, or how do we want this area to develop, and how do we engage the community in their opinions of maybe how Waunakee wants this area to develop. So I'm trying to balance that, I guess, with sort of Jason's, recommendations here on maybe how we could do it and still keep kind of the feel, the charm, and even limit maybe future sales and changes to the property. So maybe I'm glad I don't have to make a recommendation right now, because I'm still struggling a little bit with it. But I'm maybe inclined to say, for the time being, hold off. But I guess I'm open to kind of a group discussion and could probably be swayed. That's a really horrible reply. It's sort of how I feel right now on that one, Chris. Sorry. But that's maybe where I'm at right now. I'm still, still fighting through it myself a little bit.
All right, thanks, Brian. And since I saw Brian Wallace have a big smile on his face there with your comment, I'm going to go to him to see his reaction.
Oh, Chris. So I guess first of all, I'll say that I am very appreciative of Angie and her trying to keep her business here and continue to grow her business in Waunakee. I think that's a fabulous thing, and hopefully we can find a way to work it out. As far as this particular item in front of us, I would echo the sentiments of Chris, is that I'm concerned, extremely concerned, that if we start to turn individual properties here into zone commercial, that is just going to be the end of that area. And one of the things, and Brian kind of brought it up here, and it hits the point a little bit, is the conversation we had earlier tonight about redevelopment of the downtown and redevelopment of the West Business District. And that the reality of it is we don't need to do anything there. It can stay as a residential area. We don't have to talk about redevelopment or refill in reference to that area, the 300 block, even the 200 block, as far as what is residential at this point in time, or even on the east end of town. It can stay as a residential area. It is part of the charm and the lure that has always been the village of Waunakee. It's a residential area. It's located extremely well with access to services and commercial businesses, whether it's dining out or recreation, whatever it might be. So from my perspective, while I hope we can find, or that Angie, we can find a solution in some capacity, I just don't know that this is a spot.
Bill?
Thank you. Once again, I think the world of Angie and her business. I'd love to keep them here in town. I think it would be dangerous to open up this block. I think she would probably do what she says, but it opens us up to the next person that comes in and says, hey, you went along with this, you're going to have to go along with me. And I think it would be a dangerous precedent. Let's see if we can work something else out somehow.
Thanks, Bill. Brad Zeman.
I'm an advocate of affordable housing, first-time home buyers, especially on Main Street, also pro-business. And I've driven by the site here a couple times over the weekend and looked at it. Hearing the voices of the neighbors, I think I want to follow suit with those neighbors and continue to see this as an affordable home on Main Street.
Okay, I think I got everybody there with the exception of myself. So there was quite a few comments there from the residents. Angie and I had met or talked at least on the phone in regards to this, and I said the important thing was going to be to talk with the residents and see if they would be on board with this or not. And that was going to be an important feature with anything moving forward potentially here. I'm one that, and you probably heard this from my previous comments when we were talking about the West Business District, I don't see why we need to change at this point in that area. I think the residents are there. They like being there. The affordability factor, it may be there right now. It may change. I mean, if I were the person living there, I wouldn't want somebody to say that I'm in the affordable housing area. I mean, if I want to sell, I probably don't want to have that connotation given to me with my house. So if somebody wants to pay whatever it is for that house, more power to them. As far as what Angie has proposed, what's hard for all of us is that she's proposing something that's really not going to impact the character of that neighborhood. she's gonna have one employee besides herself that's gonna park in a garage and go in the house. Not really gonna be obtrusive to the rest of the people there, or no different than any resident that would be living there. One thing I see as a difference though is that it is in the middle of the block, and any community, we want to have a community of people, and a resident is very different than a business owner that's just in there occasionally. So I'm inclined to vote no as well right now. I appreciate Angie's wanting to do everything possible, and we're not making a decision tonight, so something could change, but she wants to stay in Waunakee, and she wants to own a building versus rent. And just like any person who wants to own a home versus renting an apartment, there's reasons for doing that within a business. And we heard about a new business with Vcar tonight that wants to open up his own business and build a building. That's part of it, versus renting somewhere. So that said, Kevin, I'm looking for you for a little direction on this, and maybe Brian Kleinmeyer, just to say, what are our options of what we should do tonight? Because I'm hearing that there's probably not going to be a lot of support amongst the commission members for doing this. So if you can maybe give us some guidance as far as, do we make a decision right away that's in the best interest of Angie? I would believe that she would know here's what the situation is versus dragging something out. So
Yeah, it's a recommendation to the village board, Chris, and I didn't. I suggested a deferral, not knowing how the meeting and the input from the citizens was going to go, and if the planning commission is going to want more time to dwell on this, I'm thinking, I'm counting heads. It's pretty clearly there's not enough support here to give a positive recommendation up to the village board. I think we also could look at Angie if she, if she wants to withdraw her application. I think that's a possibility. I think there's other, for us at the staff level, we can continue to work with Angie, try and find her a different place or a different home, but she's certainly entitled to a vote at the village board level. She's made her application after a recommendation from the planning commission, but I don't think there's any reason why you'd have to delay that to next month based on what I heard tonight. Brian?
Yeah, I mean, the comments that I've heard are generally, you could describe them as, it sounds like people want to keep this residentially zoned property continue to be residential zoning because you believe it benefits the village to have a residence there. And that's a perfectly legitimate basis. So again, yeah, I mean, if you want to take action tonight, it is a recommendation to the board that the desire to keep a residence zoned residential is a valid basis to recommend denial if that happens to be the direction the planning commission goes.
Okay, that said, do we have any motions that anybody is wanting to make right now?
I think Angie's got her hand up.
I got to get better. It's actually a bigger yellow hand too on the screen. I hadn't noticed that till tonight. So go ahead, Angie.
It's Zoom fatigue. I think we all have it for sure. I just really appreciate everybody opining tonight and the neighbors weighing in. And what's more important to me than owning that property is being a good citizen. So I will withdraw my request. I understand that maybe someday that particular part of town will be looked at for businesses, but it doesn't sound like the timing is right. And rather than tie up more of your time and tie up more of the neighbor's time, I'll go ahead and withdraw at this time.
Again, Angie, we talked and we met, and I appreciate you wanting to stay in Waunakee and doing the very best. And I encourage you to continue to look and have staff assist you in that search. So, and I appreciate you taking the stance that you've taken right now and being a good neighbor to the entire area there. So with that said, Brian, do we need to make a motion, or since she's withdrawing, do we need to?
You do not need to take any action then tonight since the application has been withdrawn.
Okay, sounds good. Angie, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, next we have discussion action on a request by Lone Silo North LLC for extension of the approval for Quick Trip certified survey map and a request to reconsider deed restriction related to the previously approved rezoning of the property for Kenny Farms West. Kevin?
Yeah, and I think it'd be good to hear from the Tierney's on this. They're making a request, and they've explained it to me, and I think it'd be good for you to hear it from them why there's this the extension. I don't think there's any problem with the extension for the 1 year. That seems like a slam dunk in terms at the staff level. But then in terms of allowing for this or the removal of the deed restrictions, that's something that I'm supportive. I'm just trying to figure out a way to accommodate them, but then also not leave our options open at the village level, that we're not tying our hands. So and maybe it's better to hear from the Tierney's first, and then Brian had suggested some language that may or may not be acceptable to the Tierney's that we can adjust if the Planning Commission feels fit.
Sounds good. So are the Tierney's here to present? Oh, there's Jerry.
There's Jerry.
Hello. Hi there. My dad wasn't able to make it. He's in another village board meeting. Yeah, we're trying to work with Quick Trip. They opened across the street, and they're doing good, but they wanted to, and we wanted to, working with them, push this off for a little while. And the deed restrictions, they're not going to be acceptable to Quick Trip. They basically say if they don't build, that it goes back to ag zoning, and I don't blame them for not wanting that. So that's what we're asking for.
And Brian, maybe you can weigh in, or I see Mike Lawton joined us as well. We're trying to weigh the benefits of removing and what the village is putting at risk if we do remove these deed restrictions. And one thing that Brian and I had an offline conversation about is that, it's zone commercial, so it's a pretty wide open types of uses that would be allowed there. And one potential compromise is to allow some limited commercial. I mean, we even limited on the other side, Jerry, in that, we took out tattoo parlors. I don't know, I'm gonna pick on tattoo parlors, but like we have commercial development on the other side of the street, but tattoo parlors were removed from that list. So maybe there's some movement and a compromise in limiting, the point of having some deed restrictions, but not as severe as what we proposed. The problem we have is that, we got an area that we really carved out without doing the entire planning for that neighborhood. And it's hard for planners to move forward, the Planning Commission to move forward with and not putting restrictions on, not knowing exactly what's going to happen around it. But I'm supportive of trying to find a way. I think we got a very good developer. We got a very good operator that we all want to see go in there, and trying to keep them engaged in the community, I think, is important. So trying to find a compromise to me is something that's important, but I don't know what that is off the top of my head, and maybe Brian or Mike Lawton would be able to assist with that conversation.
Well, I can comment. I can comment on what Quick Trip has said. They don't really want to sign any contractual type deed restrictions because they've contractually waived their rights. It's one thing to amend ordinances and proceed that way. It's another thing to try to get out of a contract. So they're not very interested in signing covenants, I think, is they're probably the way to boil down their position.
So, well, a deed restriction can always be amended, but we won't go down that path. Look, I mean, Kevin hit on it. I mean, the deed restriction that we have now is reasonable. And essentially what we did about a year ago was the CSM got approved. And the reason we had the deed restriction to the zoning was this property was part of the GDP for the land when Festival Foods was going to come. And this particular lot was limited to solely a convenience store as part of that GDP. Now, that being said, even though we had a reasonable basis for having the deed restriction before, you also have the ability to make a recommendation to the village board, and this is going to have to go to joint plan commission tomorrow night too, to basically say, we're going to rezone the property to commercial and we're not going to have any type of restriction at all. You have that authority, and the village board is going to have the authority to take up that recommendation. You know, one of the things that we tried to put in the packet on page 155 was, okay, let's remove the deed restriction, understanding that the potential future operator was going to have control or has an issue with it, but we can do, you know, the rezone can be conditioned upon Quick Trip purchasing the property, and then if Quick Trip ever resells the property, it goes back to ag zoning. Sounds like, what based on what Jerry said, that Quick Trip would have a problem with those conditions too. And then there's always the ability to try to find some type of middle ground, which is essentially what we did a number of years back. Well, we kind of did it with Kilkenny Commons, where Kilkenny Commons, there's certain lots that have a number of commercial uses that are allowed, but not all of the commercial uses that are in the C1 district. And we did it via deed restriction for property that Mr. Van Wee bought, where again, I think it was rezoned to C1D in that instance. But again, we had a deed restriction that still identified a fair number of commercial uses. So there's different directions that you could go here. You can say we still want to have the existing deed restriction. You can say that we don't want to have any limitations whatsoever, and we can try to find some middle ground. But it's all something that would, you know, ultimately when the Plan Commission acts, because we're in the joint planning area, we'll need to go to the Joint Plan Commission, and then the Joint Plan Commission will make a recommendation to the village board.
Okay, Kevin, any other comments or before I get
Yeah,
to
just one more comment. You know, maybe the extension gets us what we need, and you know, the 1-year extension, and that'll give the Tierney's an opportunity to plan out that neighborhood, and then we don't have to talk about deed restrictions. We can set the zoning that's appropriate there on based on what the neighborhood's going to be like.
Okay. Question for Mike, or I guess Jerry, what is Quick Trip's intentions? Is this something they want to get started on right away, or as Kevin just pointed out, we could wait a while?
Well, I think their intentions are eventually to build at the site, but I don't think their intentions are that they are going to do it, you know, like in the next couple of months or anything like that. I know, Jerry, you've probably talked to them about their schedule as well, but I think they were fine with pushing the dates out like a year.
That's right. No, I mean, deadlines were coming up and we got to do something. They're still planning on coming in, but, you know, not right now. And, you know, you could say, well, why is it a year versus 11 months or 10 months? But a year is a nice round number. And I mean, it's just what we kind of decided on with Quick Trip.
Yeah, if you approve the 1-year extension on the CSM, which we do need to have, otherwise that would have to start all over again. We don't want to do that. They would probably agree to a 1-year extension and stay in the process. I guess we can all keep talking to each other about how to resolve the zoning issue. I don't know if we'll come up with a great solution or not, but at least they'll extend their offer. We'll have them under contract. They'll still be a potential occupant of the space.
Okay, Brian, you had your hand up?
Yeah, Mike actually just answered my question. So it sounds like if the Plan Commission makes a recommendation on extending the CSM for a year and doesn't make any recommendation and then Joint Plan Commission doesn't do anything on zoning and the village board doesn't do anything on zoning, but the only thing that happens is the extension for the CSM for 12 months, we can essentially not address the zoning or any changes to the approval that's been provided at, you know, basically this meeting and next meeting for the village board.
Well, we're going to have to address the zoning issue at some point to get them to close, but we don't have to do that probably in the next month.
Okay.
We can do the extension and keep talking. I think that's the one thing we can accomplish tonight. I think we're all kind of saying, hey, we want to keep talking because, you know, I know you guys are trying to be constructive, but I think the remedies were a little too draconian from their point of view. So we just got to keep talking. Maybe if we could replicate what we have on the other side of the road where we don't have much in the way of deed restrictions, but we do have a limited number of uses that are permitted in the GDP, maybe we could replicate that somehow. Well, if you keep working at it.
Brian, could you offer us pros, cons of allowing this to just be C1D?
Well, I guess here's the thing. I mean, and I'm not intending to see anything negative about Quick Trip at all when I say this, but when you look at the collaborative process that has occurred over at Kilkenny Commons, the developer continues to own a lot of land, and I would say therefore is very interested in making sure that uses go into the commercial lots in Kilkenny Commons. And I think that they've done a really good job with not only matching uses, but also obviously working through the architecture. If we rezone this land to C1 with no deed restriction, and Quick Trip buys the land, and then Quick Trip decides for whatever reason it's not going to go ahead, it's going to sell that lot to anybody who can use any use within the C1 zoning district, not necessarily having it tied in or working with the rest of the development. And I think that was Kevin's point of, if maybe we can buy some time on the zoning, because maybe there's going to be further planning for Kilkenny Farms West. And so we'll have a better idea of what is going to go around this particular lot to find out, okay, we all seem to believe that Quick Trip would work there, but there may be a number of other commercial uses that would work there. And I think if you buy that time, it may be the case that at some point in time, the lot is either built into a general development plan, like it was initially when Festival Foods was going to come, or even if it's not built into a GDP, there is going to be a better understanding of how the land on the west side of Kew is going to be developed. So there's less of a concern with opening up that lot to, a lot of commercial uses. I mean, in the public hearing that we heard on the Main Street, there was a speaker who spoke about, and I think she was probably right. There's probably about 54 uses that are available within the commercial district. And, again, going back to Kilkenny Commons, we did not put all of those uses into the GDP for across the street because there were certain uses that we didn't want to see at the entrance to the village. So that's the risk, is you open up that lot to every single use that is within the C1 district without having any control then as to what's going to go there, and also not having an understanding of how the rest of Kilkenny Farms West is going to be developed at this point.
Of course, Brian, we never presented to them a covenant that was limited to, the more innocuous kind of uses. We just presented them a covenant that said you could only have a convenience store, gas pumps, and a car wash. So,
we did, but it's going to, because it's not going to be in a GDP to the extent at this point, to the extent that we're going to limit the uses, it's going to have to be in a deed restriction. It would just be a broader deed restriction.
but yeah, there are some things in C1 that I think we probably all agree are pretty innocuous. A watchmaker shop, or I'm being facetious, but that's one of the things in there. There's a lot of things that are probably pretty innocuous. I think if we keep talking about it and talking to them, maybe we can come up with a resolution on this. That's my thought.
Okay, commission members, questions from you. I'll just go around, try to go different order this time. Brian Wallace will go for you first for you this time.
I guess my position, and just looking for confirmation from Jerry and Mike, if they're good with just extending the CSM at this point in time for another year, is that acceptable, for the time being, and continue to have those conversations as Mike alluded to?
I believe, nothing's over till it's signed, but I believe, based on what I've heard from them, that they would keep the contract alive for another year, as long as we have an extension on the CSM and we're continuing to work on this covenant zoning issue.
It's my understanding as well.
Okay.
But we have to solve that to get them to close. So.
Who froze Jerry? I don't know why we froze Jerry, but okay, he's back. Kinda. He's frozen. Brian Malice?
I think if I'd been followed those last couple of responses, I'm probably inclined to just go with the extension.
Okay. Phil Williams?
The extension seems fine to me.
Kristen Runge?
The extension seems the easiest way to me too.
Brad Zeman?
I agreed with the board members. Extension is the easiest route.
Okay, and
I also agree, Chris.
Chris
Go
Thomas.
with the extension. Yep, I agree.
Okay, so then, I think we've we need a motion to that effect, Brian?
Yeah, so if you look at page 155 of your packet, in the section on recommended motion, you just need to make that first motion to recommend to the village board that it extend the time period in which the certified survey map must be recorded until May 1st, 2022.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion by Brian Wallace. Do we have a second? Second by
Second.
Chris Thomas, actually. I had him first, Brad, sorry. I'm just gonna comment that, I think it's important that staff work with the Kearneys and Mike and getting to an agreement on what we can do from a language perspective. So Brian and Kevin, while you're still here, we need to have that discussion so this doesn't sit and hang out there. It's not right to do for them as well. We need to have a very clear message as far as what we're going to be willing to do or not do. So I encourage us to get going on that as fast as possible. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. Tracy, roll call vote.
Brian Wallace,
Yes.
Brian Malish,
Yes.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Chris Thomas,
Yes.
Brad Zeman,
Yes.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Bill Willems.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, next we have discussion action on final draft site plan, Villages of Maine multifamily project, 701 West Main Street. Kevin?
Yeah, I think we're in a position where staff is recommending approval of the site plan. I think we've resolved a number of issues that have been brought up regarding safety, sidewalks. I think maybe the only thing left to really discuss is the color of the building. Just an update to the Planning Commission, our board weighed in and they thought a couple of things that they thought were a good resolution is the sidewalk extension and only requiring the sidewalk extension to get to the traffic signal and not allowing the sidewalk to continue to the west. So we're not encouraging people to, go someplace where they shouldn't be crossing the roadway. The color of the building, I think, is one I pointed out, probably the last one. And then there was some other TIA traffic improvement things that I identified that I think we worked through as well. I don't think there's much left on our list at a staff level. So Tracy, I'll leave it to you, Chris, if you want Tracy to share any plans on the screen, or if you think you're in a position to move forward on this. I know you've only seen it about a half a dozen times.
Yeah, I think Brian Sweeney is still with us. Maybe not.
Yes, I am.
Okay, hey Brian. So for some reason, I feel like you've been put at the end of most of our meetings, and I feel bad about that right now. So you've had to wait, but I'll say I apologize for that right off the bat. I think that they've done a great job of addressing many of our issues and being patient with us as a commission, as a village board, as a community. And the only thing that I would request is that we don't pick green, because we don't want this to look like Wisconsin Heights in any way, right, Ryan? No, I'm kidding. I'm in favor of the blue color personally, but is there anybody who's colorblind that's on the group? Because we may have you pick that color, because they gave us a couple of choices in there, it looked like in there. So I'm inclined to like the blue. That's me personally. That's the only thing that really I think we need to address. Unless you guys have other things that you want to talk about as well. But I think that in general, they've met everything that the village board came back with previously, and then any concerns that we may have had as well. So if you have concerns right now, it's important that you voice your opinion. So if you have something, please raise your hand. I'm not going to call on anybody but a planning commission member right now. Brian Malish, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was wondering, I'll be quite honest, I've not had the pleasure of diving into traffic impact analysis this much. So I don't know if maybe Kevin can help walk through these questions, or who the best is, but specifically looking at the chart that they provided, it's on page 137. And it kind of splits up the AM peak, the PM peak, talking about like traffic in and out of the site. And it looks like, if I'm reading this right, the site is getting credited for about 17 morning departures and adding in maybe 22 for the new proposed development. It's only a net change of 5 vehicles for a morning peak. And then kind of a similar, but the delta is 11 in the PM. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I didn't look at this super close either. You know, I was deferring to Kent, really somebody from Kent's team. But yeah, that's how I'm reading this as well. And you're just wondering, scratching your head, does that seem reasonable? Is that what you're?
Yeah. So
yeah, right.
Yeah. So I come out Holiday Drive most every morning and turn right eastbound onto Main Street. And I'm usually only able to do that once the light changes colors, just based on the amount of traffic coming eastbound on 19. So when I was looking at this and thinking this is a 50-unit development, in theory, could be 100 people living there. And I mean, I know different, people work different hours a day. We're not all taking off between, I don't know what it was, 7 to 9 a.m., but 22 felt light to me, or to look at it as only a net add of 5 to the site, knowing that I don't know that I've ever seen anybody turn out of that site since I've lived here. It came off pretty light. And I know they're using very kind of like, 30,000 foot generic data to kind of feed into this thing. But does that data ever get looked at on a more sort of specific micro level? I don't know. Yeah. The number of cars in any given day, we've got one driveway, one route coming out of the site. It's kind of bugged me. And I think this is the first time we've seen the traffic analysis. At least the first time I've noticed it, maybe. And those numbers just seem kind of light.
Yeah, there's a substantial increase in the number of trips. I mean, looking, there's 200 increase on total daily trips over from what was there before. So I'm not sure how they're breaking that out in the methodology that they're using, but I'd have to. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. That's something I'd have to defer back and bring in the traffic engineer from Strand, which is probably not even Kent. It's going to be an engineer.
I just saw
Kyle
further up.
Yep, Kyle, who lives in Waunakee.
Oh, pressure's on Kyle.
Maybe he's watching. Anybody see if he's on?
I don't think he's on.
No, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I can resolve. I can't resolve that with you.
Yeah,
Yeah, not something I can resolve for you tonight. So if that's
Sure.
going to hold you back, maybe I can think of a way around that, or we'd have to defer. But I know that timing is pretty critical on this project.
So I would say that because
Jason
of
came
the-
on the stream, so maybe he's.
Okay. What
Jason
I was
came
gonna
on, so
say
maybe
was-
he's got the answer for us.
Go ahead.
I don't have an answer on, excuse me, what is the question really is the allocation of trips within the peak hour appropriate? Is that really what the question boils down to?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe. Yeah. And Kevin pointed out it was the total trips, the net delta is up to 18, and we're only, seems like we're attributing a really small number of those to sort of what I guess I always pictured as the peak time for departures and arrivals. And I don't know if there's a reason why this is such a small amount allocated to that departure time or the return, the AM, the peak versus the PM in the peak.
Yeah, I also don't have an answer to offer you on that one.
So,
Now, if there's 18 leaving in the AM peak, that 18, that's still a substantial number of the 50 units. So that's, granted, there's could be multiple, vehicles per unit, but that's, that's 40% of the units, leaving in during that AM peak.
Though that's also the total. That assumes 5 arriving and 13 leaving. So while I don't expect that the traffic is going to be a concern, I think it's fair to seek follow-up on the numbers.
Go ahead, Kristen.
I'm just curious as to the concern about traffic. We were putting a new business here, or we were getting, let's say the grocery store expanded. We would easily see traffic increases and happily see traffic increases triple or quadruple what we'd see for a residential building. And we're moving on to, it's our main street, but it's also a highway through town. I'm curious, is there a concern about the road not being able to handle the traffic, or what the concern about the traffic is? I personally don't know that it feels like much of an issue with the site plan, if the site plan is what we're supposed to be discussing.
Yeah, I think the only thing that this could drive is the need for turn lanes. So once it hits that threshold of having dedicated turn lanes into the site, and I don't think that we're even close to that of meeting those thresholds of needing those dedicated turn lanes. So that's how I'd probably relate back.
Thanks for the clarification, Kevin.
So as I read through this, it really looked like the things they want to make sure of is the sight lines they have really good sight lines coming out of this facility, both east and west, but it's flat and people can see real well. So that was one thing I noticed. I don't think DOT is going to approve something if they don't feel that it's going to be okay there either. So I'm sure they've done their research and they've got a lot more data than we would ever have. I understand what Brian is saying. I think what you're getting at is the left-hand turn coming out is going to be difficult because of the amount of traffic coming from Highway 12 into town and through. I think that's what you're getting at. Is how we're going to get folks out.
It
of
is.
And
Yeah,
something I think that obviously we can address. That's not something I don't think that's going to get fixed today. But I think that's something we can continue to address and make sure that that's a safe entry point onto that road for those left-hand turns. So, all right, that said, any other comments about the traffic? Next then we have is the sidewalk, which we brought up before, that it's not going to be required to be going down as far. However, one of the things we discussed at the board, and Brian Kleinmeyer, please chime in to make sure I'm stating this right, was that we would reserve the right to install a sidewalk of some sort, whether it's there or maybe it's the trail system, something along those lines. Is that correct?
That is correct.
For into the future. So, Plan Commission members, how do you feel about that? We're not going to require it right now, but we reserve the right that we would require it into the future if circumstances were necessary, and/or if we want to put a trail through the back, running and connecting, going behind Piggly Wiggly. That could be something we could have them participate with. How does everybody feel about that? Thumbs up if you're good with it. If you're not good with it,
I think that sounds good. I like the flexibility that we have of not having it now, but requiring it later if we want.
Okay. Jason, you don't get to vote. But I think you have your hand up because you want to talk, so go ahead.
My question is seeking clarification that we're not talking about removing all of the sidewalk because we would still require connection to the existing sidewalk along McDonald's, and it would get at least as far as the first internal circulation sidewalk alongside the driveway. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Any other concerns with that? Otherwise, I'm looking for a thumbs up for people.
So Chris, you're telling me, because it looks like there's a sidewalk that goes to the west end of the property, that would not be in there?
Correct. Is that, at this time, we're trying not to have people go down, there's no sidewalk to connect to, there's nothing down there at this point, so it doesn't really make any sense that we drive people into an area that doesn't have any pedestrian access. But we may have trails and things that are gonna end up going through that area at some point. We just don't have them right now, and they're not planned yet, but we may have those. So that would give us the opportunity, if we want to say now we want to have this sidewalk in, or we could have them connect from the backside of their property too. Okay, that said, now I'm gonna put thumbs up one more time for those who are okay with it. Okay, I see 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I see everybody except for Brian, it looks like. Okay, so Brian's a no go on that. Okay. Then last, and if Brian Kleinmeyer, if I miss anything, let me know. The color of the color choice is really all we have left. So let me ask Brian Sweeney to pipe in quick. If he had a choice, what would your choice be, Brian Sweeney?
Oh dear. We got it down to that blue and pewter, right?
Yep.
Brent, our architect who designed this. Would you like to weigh in? Brent Shipper? He often has an opinion. He said pewter. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Brian, sorry. I just prefer the pewter color just simply because everyone has favorite colors. And that's one of the reasons that we showed a lot of colors is everyone has a different one. And so the color choice that was more neutral, I think was probably the choice that most people could get behind. So that's what we were recommending at this point. Sorry, Chris, I like the blue too, but it does seem like a neutral choice is very often the best choice.
Okay, Ed, any comments from you? This is one of your areas of expertise.
Well, professionally, I think they're both good choices. So what I'm about to say is a personal decision. Professionally, I don't think you can go wrong with either one. I am going to lean towards the blue for a number of reasons. I think it brings the building further and gives it more prominence on the street. It has a degree of vibrancy that complements the fact that people live in this building. And, you know, it can always be changed 20, 30 years down the road. This is definitely a 20, 30-year building. No, I just think it gives it more vibrance and how do I say this? Not landmark status from a historic landmark perception, but it gives it landmark status in terms of an identity. I can say I live in the blue building at such and such address. So my personal vote is blue. Not to cop out on you, I respect the design team, and I think we need to be bold and celebrate this building and not go neutral.
All right, so we have 3 choices from what I can see. We can say blue, we can say the other color, or we can say you can choose which one you want. So I'm going to say let's choose blue, and I'm going to say I'm going to be for blue. Who's with me? If you are, thumbs up. I see 4, 5. I see 5. Oh, and there's 6. So we have 6. Brian Malik, are you in with blue or no?
I think I'm in the pewter camp.
All right, so you've been defeated 6-1. All right, so not to
It's a trend.
not to put it in there. Brian Sweeney, are you okay with blue? Since we're the same.
Yes, we
blue.
are, of course.
Awesome. Okay. That said, Brian Kleinmeyer, is there any other issues that are outstanding that we need to resolve?
No, I don't believe so. And I would just say that if you do make the recommended motion on page 107, I think at a staff level, we understand and everybody understands that it includes the blue for the building and it includes your discussion regarding the sidewalk.
Okay. All right, then let's see, do we have a motion that Brian is stating?
And can I just ask a question? So the recommended motion does say, condition that all staff comments are resolved to the satisfaction of the village engineer. Do we still need that? Or is that the questions we just went over and we no longer need that clause in there?
I think that there may be a few other technical comments that that Kent or Ed or Jason have made that are in there that aren't necessarily, up to you guys have to chime in, but there's just an agreement. I think even with Mr. Sweeney and his group. So I do think it's still appropriate to have that, the recommended motion on page 107.
Okay, then with that, I will make the motion to approve the site plan with the condition that all staff comments are resolved to the satisfaction of the village engineer and the village attorney.
Okay, we have a motion by Chris Thomas, second from Kristen Runge. Only question I have, Brian and Brian Kleinmeyer, is with that motion, are the sidewalks portion clarified? Do we need to clarify anything more with that, or is that fine?
No, I think you all, my understanding is that motion includes, we're going to do the portion of the sidewalk that Jason had identified, but we are not going to extend it to the west for the reasons that you had explained earlier, and we'll build some of that language into the agreement.
Okay, perfect. Any other comments? Okay, Tracy. Oh, Brian Wallace, go ahead.
Just so I understand correctly, with this recommended motion of approval, where does that put us as a project as a whole then?
So this would be the last step for the plan commission. You are approving the site plan. We will have on the agenda at the village board meeting a week from today, an agreement that is related to the project and related to financial assistance that the village will be providing. I can tell you that one of the terms and conditions of the development agreement is that the project be constructed pursuant to the site plan approved by the plan commission.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, then I'll call the question. Tracy, roll call vote, please.
Fred Seaman,
Yes.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Phil Willems,
Yes.
Chris Thomas,
Yes.
Brian Wallace,
Yes.
Brian Malish.
No.
Motion carried.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for all of your comments, questions, and I appreciate Brian being here tonight with Brent to answer any questions as well. All right, next on our agenda, we have concept review and discussion Woodland Crest Phase 2 General Development Plan, Senior Housing and Multifamily Outlots 1 and 2. Kevin?
Yeah, no action tonight. So I'm strongly recommend that you hear the concept level, and I think you can even limit your feedback until you defer this to the Joint Planning Commission. And what I think is really important is you direct them to go meet with the neighborhood. I think there's some impacts on that surrounding neighborhood that we should get some people to weigh in on fairly early in the process. So that's all I had, Chris. So I think it's a pretty listen in and chime in as you think is necessary, but you might want to withhold some of those comments.
Okay, sounds good. So who do we have presenting tonight?
I would say, Connor, you're going to be my point person, right?
Yeah, I can start off by giving a high-level overview, and then I'll introduce Jess to kind of walk through what we're looking at this evening, if that works for everyone. My name is Connor Kearney, Ford Development Group. I'd like to start off by thanking staff, consultants, and the Plan Commission for the review of these materials associated with the second phase of development for Woodland Crest. We certainly are excited about the plans being discussed on both Outlot 1 and Outlot 2, which we'll touch on in more detail here shortly. With the ultimate goal of an amendment to the Woodland Crest General Development Plan, We do understand that certain preliminary steps will be very important. So in addition to discussing these plans in concept with Plan Commission this evening, we also plan to orchestrate community outreach in May, as Kevin stated, as we recognize that several sensitive relationships with neighboring parcels and what is being proposed in this next phase of Woodland Crest. So at this time, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce JSD Senior Planner Jess Vaughn, who will talk through an overview of our submittal and touch on the critical items being contemplated in the proposed GDP amendment. Jess, take it away. Oh, Jess, I don't think we can hear you.
Not yet, Jess.
No, you may have to call back in, Jess. We'll give her a minute here. I can walk through things as well if the audio isn't working. I think she's just dialing back in here. Bear with us, guys.
Connor, we can make someone a host if you want to, if you got a presentation, or if you want Tracy to go to certain pages in the packet, we can do that as well.
Okay, perfect. I think I'll pull up the general development plan and just have that up in the background, the master plan as Jess talks through. And then I have the document as well, if we want to reference any particular sections. So I can pull that up right now.
Okay, Jessica, are you the caller with the phone number ending in 7111? Did she not? I didn't see it.
She did, yeah.
Yeah, try and bring her in.
All right, how about now?
We got you, Jess.
Yes. Sorry about that. All right, well, thanks for the introduction, Connor. Sorry about the technical difficulties. These things are always new, I feel like, even though we do them 100 times a day. But with that, I'll start with just a really quick overview of the Woodland Crest General Development Plan. Originally, Woodland Crest, the GDP was approved in April of 2019, so a couple of years ago. And at that time, the GDP only included developments on lots 1 and 2, which were both planned for commercial developments. That includes our Hy-V and the inline retail that Connor just highlighted there, buildings 1 and site 2 there. At the time of the GDP approval, because formal development proposals had not yet come to fruition for outlots 1 and 2, they were not included in the overall general development plan area. With that, though, the GDP did contemplate future land uses and inclusion of outlots 1 and 2 within the overall Woodland Crest general development plan. And it also noted that the outlots would remain at that time in ag holding until such a time that development was actually proposed. And outlots 1 and 2 are the subject of the discussion this evening, noted as buildings 3 and 4 here on this master plan. So the GDP at the time when we were going through those original approval processes identified both outlots 1 and 2 for potential future location of higher density residential development or additional commercial development. The GDP noted that the integration of residential development as being a critical component to the success of creating a mixed-use lifestyle center. Residential uses would provide support to the commercial development and ensure its success, as well as providing a transition between the intensity of County Highway Q and commercial uses located along there to the single-family residential that buffers this, that's on the east side of the overall general development plan area. So with that, before the commission this evening is we're looking at 2 conceptual development plans, one for outlot 1, which is shown here in the master plan as number 3, and the other for the development of outlot 2, which is shown on the master plan as item 4. Outlot 1 is comprised of 95 to 100 market rate apartment style multifamily units with underground parking and at grade amenity open spaces. Outlot 2 is comprised of senior family housing development that includes independent living, which will function more like age-restricted apartment style residential units, as well as assisted living and memory care beds. We have roughly 80 beds anticipated there, and the assisted living independent, or I'm sorry, the independent living would be 120 individual units. With both concept development plans, several code modifications are proposed that Jason outlined really well in the memo that is in your Plan Commission packet this evening. For discussion purposes, though, we wanted to focus on a couple of those items in particular, just to get the Plan Commission's feedback so we are clear on how to move forward with some of those code modifications. The first one relates to density and unit mix. This is really a three-part conversation. The first two parts really pertain to that senior housing development, so item number 4 here on the master plan. First, we were looking to get the Commission's input on whether this idea of beds associated with the memory care and assisted living are going to be considered the same as actual dwelling units, especially with regard to calculating densities, as well as future calculations for development impact fees. The second part that pertains to the senior family is really in regard to confirming whether the proposed senior housing is going to count towards that housing mix calculation that the village looked at in terms of land development goals and policies last fall, and thinking about that 75-25 unit mix. And finally, the third part of the overall density and dwelling unit mix conversation really relates to the overall number of units within the GDP. So currently we are looking at 100 market rate apartment style units, 120 age-restricted senior housing independent living units, and 80 assisted living memory care beds. So really we're looking to gauge whether the Commission feels that that's consistent with the housing study that was published, I believe, last fall as well, which anticipated 150 units overall in the Woodland Crest General Development Plan area. So looking at a couple of the other items in the MSA memo, we'd like to get the Commission's feedback on the proposed building height and retaining wall height code modification requests. With regard to building height, we're anticipating building heights in excess of the maximum height permitted in the village. This is going to depend on how our overall site grading works out. At this point, we know that the additional building height is a result of the overall grade on site, and that is primarily due to how the zoning code directs us to measure building height, which is taken from the building line along the street frontage. On this site in particular, just looking at site 3, there's about 5 feet of grade change between the building line along Simon Crestway and the anticipated finished floor elevation of the building. So thinking about that, we're looking at an additional 5 to 6 feet of building height as a result of that grade change. But if you measure from the finished floor elevation to the peak of the roof, you're really only looking at that, I think it was 45 feet on that building. So we'd like to get the Commission's feedback on the requested building height modification. Also with regard to height, looking at retaining walls, we do anticipate retaining walls due to the grade change on both of these sites. In looking at overall site grading recently and kind of refining things, and as we continue to refine and modify grading, the heights of the walls will inevitably change. And at this point, we're comfortable with not needing a height modification for retaining walls, but we wanted to get the Commission's feedback just so we know kind of where things are at and how the Commission feels about the retaining wall heights in general, on the outside chance that we're not able to accommodate heights of retaining walls below the 10-foot max. And then finally, the last piece is architectural style and design intent. Just real quick, we wanted to get the Plan Commission's feedback on the proposed architectural style. It's something that we really haven't seen in the Woodland Crest General Development Plan area. But we do feel that it would be unique and add character, as well as create a sense of place for both of these buildings. And we are looking at a modern agrarian style. So we just wanted to get the commission's feedback on some of those architectural intent images that we included in the GDP materials. So with that, that concludes my portion of the presentation. And Connor and I are available to answer questions, and look forward to getting the feedback from the commission.
Okay, Kevin, your comments originally were just kind of live this as a kind of a presentation. Are you anticipating that we should be asking questions right now, or should we just kind of sit and absorb and wait till next time, or what were you thinking?
My preference is that you get some weigh-in from the neighborhood before you give too much feedback, but certainly it's your preference. I mean, it's the planning commission's, you know, it's your choice. I mean, if you want to provide some feedback now, you can, maybe without going into the detail that was presented in the memo. This is quite a bit different than what was originally envisioned for that neighborhood. So I think getting the neighborhood to weigh in on this early before taking a position on some of these items is important.
Okay, that said, I never want to not give the planning commission members an opportunity to speak if they want to. So I'm just going to go around, and if you have comments for this evening for our Focus on Forward Development Group, please give those. Otherwise, if you don't have anything for tonight, just say to pass till the next time. So I'll start with Phil Owens this time.
I'd like to wait and see how they weigh on it.
Thank you. Brad Zeman.
I will wait as well. I'd like to see what the neighbors have to say. A little worried about the density and traffic and the proximity to the high school.
Okay, Kristen Runge.
No comment from me.
Brian Malish.
The same. I think the neighbors ought to be weighing in on this first.
Brian Wallace.
No comment.
Okay, I'll reserve my comments for now as well. But I think, thank you for the forward development people for coming and showing us and presenting the initial concept here. I'm sure we'll be speaking about this often in the future. So that's it. I don't think we have any other actions, so we can move forward to.
Hey, Chris?
Yeah.
As long as we're all here, may I just make a comment to reinforce something from my memo?
Sure.
I just want to point out, kind of beat the drum of my request for site sections, not only through the site, but into adjacent development. Especially the east side of Simon Crestway is a fairly complex site because of the grade changes. And when it comes to meeting with neighbors as well as you and us as staff would learn a lot by understanding spatially, seeing a section through the site to understand what the sight lines actually are and how tall these are relative to existing homes, relative to different grade changes that they sit on. So I just am hoping to see that. I'm hoping that others get a chance to see that too before deciding, you know, what's too much or too big, or how to adjust it to make it fit.
Okay, thank you for comments, Jason. Appreciate it. Okay.
Can I ask a question real quick too, Chris? Sorry. I'm wondering if Connor and Jessica can run down that list again of the items that you wanted an opinion on. I agree. I'm not going to provide an opinion today either, but if you can just run down that list again, that'd be nice.
Sure. Everybody can still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So really, we're looking at a couple of items. This idea of density and unit mix, in particular, how it applies to the senior housing development that's proposed. Only because senior housing is sometimes a little bit of a tricky part of the conversation in terms of you have this mix of different types of living styles. You have your independent living, which functions like a truly independent unit. And then you have these assisted living and memory care facility and beds. So just really getting a good sense of direction from the village on how we should be, looking at our impact fees and starting to think about those and calculating those. as well as how those beds translate to units so we can provide the metrics of the site, right? And then also with regard to the housing study that was published last fall, as well as the village's recent discussion and adoption of new guidelines and policies as it relates to housing and providing and encouraging a mix of housing within the village. Then we also were looking for feedback on the building height modifications and thinking about how grade is really impacting that. Obviously, if a building height modification isn't something that the plan commission or the village board would be willing to support, we would have to reconsider our grades and our building heights, of course. Retaining walls was also part of that. I know right off the bat here, we submitted a request for height modification for retaining walls to exceed, I believe it was a maximum of 10 feet, Jason. Since then, we've been kind of tweaking our grading plans a little bit to bring those numbers down, and we're pretty confident that we can get them down below that 10 feet. But to what extent, we're not 100% sure yet at this juncture. So having at least some feedback on how the plan commission and staff feels about retaining wall heights in general would be helpful for us. Knowing that we have a corner location, which could be a pretty prominent location, and thinking about what that pedestrian experience is along the street. And then finally, that architectural style and intent. It's a little bit different than what we've been seeing in the general development plan area, so we wanted to get some good feedback on that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, any others for questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Forward Development folks, and look forward to seeing the next round of information. All right, we are at Waunakee Westport Joint Plan Commission update, report on Joint Plan Commission items for action. Kevin? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've gone through all the items that are going to be on the joint plan.
Then we have, do I look as orange on the screen as I feel like I look on my own? No? All right. Hopefully I don't look too orange to everybody. I apologize if that's the case. Lighting is bad in here. I'm going to make our motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Chris Thomas. Any other comments this evening? Seeing none. Tracy. Actually, I'm going to do it. Roll call. Motion to adjourn. Raise your hand. Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
That makes it easy. Motion carried.
Have a
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.